Hey, Kat, can you hear us?
Very last minute for it.
Yes, we can.
All right, looks like we're good to go.
Is it in our packet or?
They just sent it in an email like an hour ago. Hour and a half ago.
So we'll go ahead and let you kick things off. Just I'll let you do a little introduction of while we're looking at this and let you get things rolling.
And just before you get started, we have some people here in the audience. If you haven't done so, please sign in over here. And then during the meeting, if you want to speak, raise your hand and I'll call you out, and then come up to the mic because we'll have people online that can't hear when you're sitting over there. Okay.
All right, are we all ready?
Yep.
All set.
Great. Okay. So welcome. We are glad to be here, at least remotely in Fraser. We're excited to talk to you today about tax increment finance and downtown development authorities. My name is Catherine Carell, and I'm with Downtown Colorado, Inc. I also have one of my board members, Troy Bernberg, who is with Northland Securities, and we work with a lot of downtown development authorities together. And we also have another one of our great members and supporters from Pioneer Development, Andy Arnold. So each of them will have a chance to speak, and they can give you a little bit of their background. I have been with Downtown Colorado, Inc. for 15 years. And I have to say it is a true labor of love. Working with these types of organizations and helping communities really make, foster the type of development that they want to see is a really fun way to spend your day. And I am blessed to be doing it. So I'm going to go on. Our organization has been around since 1982. For 40 years, we have assisted communities in thinking through the tools and types of organizations that can facilitate the type of development they are looking to do. We work with the different types of financing entities that we'll be talking about tonight, as well as chambers of commerce, nonprofit Main Street organizations, a lot of local governments, and we have different services, whether it be our educational services that I believe we shared some links to some of the materials that we've put together. So you can check those out. You can also go on our website, but we have a ton of different things, whether it be reportings or materials, and a lot of educational events, as well as on-site technical assistance that we can do with your community. So please let us know if after this you're interested in talking about other things to further your decision-making and the ideas of what you can do. So we do work with the entities that we will be talking about today. So whether it be local governments, we work with communities and kind of identify where they are, what they're trying to do. But business improvement districts, downtown development authorities, urban renewal authorities, as well as many other things. So we can also help you connect with peer communities that are working on things that are akin to where you are trying to go. This is sort of the idea of what really drives us as an organization and most of our members, right? So thinking about not just downtowns, but commercial centers, town centers, all of these things. When you think about your community, there's this idea that you could fill all the potholes and your community will still not necessarily feel connected or a sense of place. People don't want just someplace that they can live. They don't want someplace that's okay. What they want is someplace they can love, someplace that is excellent and amazing. And so what we do is work with these tools because they can help you as a community go above and beyond, right? So when you're thinking about here you are as the community, and here are private sector groups coming in and investing. What you want to do is get them not to do the bare minimum, because many of those private investors may have profit as their main goal, right? Some of them may love your community, but many of them may not even be from your community. So really thinking about how you can get them to go above and beyond with the very unique and special things that you as Fraser are looking for. So Peter Kageyama, if you haven't ever read him, I do highly suggest checking out For the Love of Cities. He's got some great videos. He's a real fun speaker as well. We've had him at some of our stuff. And so to get to your point today, we're going to talk a little bit, we're going to have some introductory discussions. And then we'll talk about why we sometimes need to influence development to get what you want as a community. What is tax increment finance, who can use it, and then talking through the formation process. And we have planned this to be less than full amount of time so that we can field a lot of questions. But if there are questions as we're going, we have slides throughout where we would like to get your questions. And I know there's a process for people to raise their hand. So do write your questions down if you have them, and then we'll come to those pauses in our presentation and jump right up there and get your question out, okay? So we did want to start out with a little conversation, and I hope that this will work okay with the process there. But we wanted for you all as a community to share what some of your biggest challenges are, just to kind of have that on the table as we start off this talk. And I know Ed and Michael, you know, you've got a pretty good handle on this, but if other people want to share some ideas as well, we'd love to hear.
Housing, parking, heavy traffic, high visitor volume during peak seasons, and how to handle them.
Cool.
And Kat, this is Ed. We talked on the phone several times about this as well. You know, one of the things that I believe that could really benefit the town is also getting more business development in our downtown. You know, being a tourist town, we don't seem to get as much of that tourist trade, you know, past the Safeway store. So finding a way to attract certain type of businesses, generate more sales tax, and make us better able to meet some of our downtown objectives and our strategic objectives.
Super. All right. And if there's more ideas, if we haven't captured them all, then that is great. So what we like to suggest is that you kind of start by thinking about where you are on the spectrum of a vibrant downtown. And so when we think about downtowns, we think about them as stagnant, growing, or mature. And a stagnant downtown has a lot of vacancies. It has a lot of underutilized properties. The image might not be so great. And especially, I think, like the base standard in our world is safe and clean. Right? Because nobody wants to spend time in a place that is neither safe nor clean. And sometimes that's traffic, sometimes that's, you know, some sort of other thing that's bothering you. Growing is really where you are considering it up and coming. You see new businesses coming in. If one closes, it gets filled. People are investing in different ways. People are thinking about the image and kind of upscaling the, you know, maybe the facade of their building, or adding in landscaping, or doing fun kind of placemaking type projects. And then you have mature, where it's more established. You have a strong mix of retail, restaurants, jobs, and it's an inviting place to be. And so just as a community, where do you all see yourself?
Growing.
Definitely growing.
Good, good. much better than stagnant. And it's probably the more fun. So when you think about those stages, you want to think about your priorities based on where you are, right? And so as you're thinking about the tools that you want to get into, in the growing stage, you want to focus on attracting new businesses, marketing the area, beautifying and improving your public realm, providing meaningful participation and pathways for leadership for owners and businesses, and conveying that image, maybe your future image rather than where you've come from, right? So these are just a couple things to have in mind as we go through our conversation. Because then the next thing is, what is your dream? You want housing, you want more commercial space, you want to get the people past Safeway. Are there other things that would be your dream development to bring to Fraser? All right. Well, we'll keep
I
going.
like a big old dance club.
I too.
A bar and restaurant with a big dance floor. We were gonna have one, but the market fell out.
There's space for that right down.
I know
We could have that happen.
that's part of my dream. Big old dance club.
Needs to finish their building.
All right. You are my friend. And one day we're going dancing in Fraser. Okay. Cool. Well, I think that gives us a lot to go on. And what I'm going to do is ask Troy, what we wanted to touch on next is kind of getting into why you would want a DDA, why you need to support development to get to where you want to be. And then he'll touch base on more of the nuts and bolts of DDAs. Troy?
All right, couldn't get to mute very quickly there, or unmute. It's nice to see everyone. By way of just quick background and introduction about myself, again, my name's Troy Bernberg. I'm managing director in public finance for a firm called Northland Securities. It's a relatively new company, about 10 years to Colorado, but I've been doing public finance myself for about 20 years now. In communities just like yours. I've had the privilege, the distinct privilege of traveling all corners of this state. And I really have grown to love communities like yours throughout the state. I've been a visitor in your community a number of times, and really excited to be a part of the panel tonight. So, you know, I'm working with two DDAs right now, each of them both formed in 2020. So I've got some really good perspective and recent perspective about, you know, the formation process. I wasn't involved in the formation process for these two DDA clients of mine, but I was quickly brought on after they were formed and they were getting started. And I think, you know, from that perspective, I've got some insight to share later on. But DDAs are just really important tools and mechanisms to help promote change and redevelopment and development in your community. And, you know, it's a tool in the economic development toolbox, okay? And it's a tool that's not used terribly much. There's only 19 DDAs in the state of Colorado. 2 of them were formed in 2020, so those are the 2 most recent. And you know, I think they were purposefully put in place to help revitalize their town cores. And that's really what DDAs are when they're implemented well and successfully, okay? It's really a component unit of the town, and its real mission is to further you know, economic development in line with what the town is doing from an economic development standpoint. It provides a source of funding, tax increment, which I can go into and will in some detail. And it's only one of 2 entities that can kind of capture tax increment, okay? So that's the concept that you make an investment in your community in year, 1 or 2, and that development creates more property and or sales taxes as a result of that development. And those property and or sales taxes that are captured because of that development is tax increment. And it's really an incentive tool and an economic development tool. Okay. It's an incentive tool for developers because there is oftentimes what we call a gap in a project. Okay. And you might hear that term or gap funding. And what does that really mean? And this is one principal way that DDAs can participate in. Okay. And let's say, as Kat aptly pointed out, almost all developers, some of them are going to be more impassioned and more of that community partner, but almost all of them are going to look at, a cost benefit and a rate of return on their money that they're investing in your community. And in some cases, items like I'll talk about in a moment, the developer says, I can almost get there, but I can't afford this component of the project. Okay. And gap funding is different from every development. Gap funding typically changes and is unique to the development in front of you. And so sometimes the gap, hopefully there is no gap, right? That would be ideal. But if there is a gap, that's where the DDA can help participate. Okay. And so you use that tax increment as an incentive to that developer to say, okay, I might, as a developer, might be able to get some of my costs reimbursed. And that makes the project more viable for the developer and makes it more likely to happen and occur. Okay. And so, there's a lot of analysis that goes into gap funding. There's a lot of data collection, etc. But I think what's important for you all to know is that there generally is a gap in the construction or development funding. And how do you close that gap without using town resources? Okay. And you do that by using tax increment from a DDA. And, I think, forgive me, I'm just finding my notes here, things that can be eligible to reimburse a developer for that gap. Think of things like infrastructure principally. Okay. Let's say multimodal improvements, parking, as a trustee mentioned, utilities, public right of way, stormwater, water improvements, fire prevention. A lot of those costs don't provide a real return to a developer. And oftentimes the DDA can provide that public incentive, that public commitment that private capital follows. I like that saying because to me, private capital, i.e. the developer, will be more attracted to Fraser with a DDA and tax increment than they might otherwise, right? Because they know there's a source of funding that they could tap to help them close that gap and make that project a reality. I think DDAs are if we're looking at BIDs, DDAs, and URAs, and I think you've already had this discussion, so I'm not going to be repetitive, but I think what I've found about DDAs is that, it's important to have that good, close, symbiotic relationship with your municipality. Really, the DDA there is to support the town's economic development efforts. So really, all the things that you'd like to do should be the same from the DDA's perspective and from the town's perspective. And so, DDAs are quasi-local government, but they do have a big brother in their municipality. Okay, so the municipality goes through the formation process, which I'll talk about in a few minutes, but that municipality then approves the DDA's budget. Okay, and if there is any bond authorization, the town has to approve that bond issuance as well. So there's a little less autonomy with a DDA than there is, let's say, with a URA, but I think that's an advantage. I think that if the economic development vision is the same, it's a great relationship that can be very, very impactful. Again, under statute, the DDA is allowed to provide resources, generally a public benefit. It can deter and halt blight, but it does not need a blight determination. Okay, so that's an important distinction from a URA. And with a DDA, you can elect to have a mill levy. My two clients don't have mill levies, and I very much understand the rationale behind it. Certainly in the environment we're in, certainly in the West Slope, where I've done a lot of principally my work, I understand the aversion to, new tax increases. So you do want to think about staying operationally sustainable as a DDA, as a downtown development authority. But beyond that, you've got a lot of leeway to assist developers with that gap funding to fund infrastructure. You're allowed to use that tax increment revenue to hire staff, to have operations, to pay the necessary consultants, whether they be planning or study consultants, financial consultants, attorneys. A lot of times those resources can actually be pooled together between a town and a DDA. And certainly with no mill levy in place, the DDA does kind of is subject to only collecting increment. And so we can talk about what that looks like. So let me see if I forgot anything. All right, so before I go into kind of the formation process, Kat, could I ask you to pull up a slide? Could I ask you to pull up the tax increment projection slide?
Yes, just before we leave this, this table and more detail along these lines is in the downtown financing mechanism guide that I did send a link to, so you can get into this and read more about it.
Right. So another, and that's a good point, Catherine. Thank you. As a DDA, you can acquire property. Okay, you can take over parking operations if you'd like, as I said earlier. And you've got a 30-year time period from the time that the tax increment clocks are started, and I can talk about that in a little bit more detail. But the idea about TIF again is you have a base. I'll focus on property tax for the time being. One thing I would ask you to consider is including sales tax and or property tax in your DDA formation. So give some thought to that.
Is this the slide you wanted?
At the very least, let's include both sources for now. If you want to narrow that, that's great. But I think it's important to really keep that flexibility and optionality in mind. And so let's say in year one, the base, assessed value, and I'm just using illustrative numbers here. And let's say the base valuation is 4.8 million. Okay. The idea around tax increment is you use that tax increment as an incentive to bring development into your community. That development occurs, and then you're using that tax increment to reimburse the developer for those certain eligible costs, principally infrastructure. But then the idea is the tax increment is created from that development. Okay, so if you've got $4 million of assessed value on a particular property in year one, if that development were not to occur, illustratively, you would have a $6.1 million assessed value at the end of a 25-30-year period. Okay, so that's basically pretty slow, minimal growth. And I know we haven't seen that recently, but historically, that's growth at inflation. Now, if you were to have an investment, a development in your community, and it increased property values above that 4 million, and it catalyzed other development around it, illustratively, you could end up with an assessed value of $11 million at the end of that 30-year period. And that is a tide that raises all ships, okay? Because at the end of that 30-year period, the taxing entities in your jurisdiction will benefit from that new increased assessed value at the end of the 30 years. During that 30 years, you get to capture all the overlapping taxes within your DDA boundaries, okay? So depending on what those are, you're going to have a school district, special service districts, the county, the city, all, with either a sales tax or a property tax component in their fundings, right? And so when you layer down the boundaries, you determine what that overlapping property tax is. The sales tax comes from the city principally, if you decide to go that route. And so you're collecting those overlapping mill levies in your DDA boundaries for a period of 30 years. So with no development, you're looking at pretty stagnant or pretty slow growth through that period. But if you were to have a DDA, historically, what that DDA does is it catalyzes development and increases values, and you capture the taxes there collected on the value above that base, okay? So your school district, your other special service districts will continue to receive their tax revenues on that baseline, okay? But anything that's over that baseline is collected by the DDA, okay? And, to me, as I said earlier, this tax increment serves as a incentive and as a monetary tool to really help the community encourage private sector investment. And so at this point, I'll leave it to some questions and any thoughts or feedback you might have. I'm going to talk about the formation here in a few minutes after the next speaker, Andy Arnold.
So who serves, so I assume this DDA is a separate authority?
Yes.
Who serves
Yes.
on that board? How are they appointed or elected?
Sure. I was going to address that in my later comments, but I'm happy to do that now.
You
I
can
love
wait.
the excitement around it. So, to me, typically they're, my two clients, okay, have independent boards that were appointed by the town, okay, or the city. But you have a board of trustee or a councilor representative on your board, okay? The town board of trustees could serve as the governing board for the DDA, or you could appoint folks. I always recommend that you have someone from the municipality as a liaison. I think that's incredibly important. In one case, I have a client whose mayor is on the board of the DDA. In another case, it's a city councilor. So did I answer your question? Would you like me to go into more detail?
I'll save the other questions until you're done.
Oh, okay, cool.
Could you back up
Sure.
just a little bit? What exact is this? It's a nonprofit organization that's formed independent of the town governance. How is it structured? And
Sure.
How does it
So-
interface with the town?
Right. That's a great question. So it's a governmental entity that is formed by the town. Okay. And it's got its own, jurisdiction, its own boundaries. It's got its own powers. It's got its own governing board. Like I said, that may be the town board of trustees or appointed. And those powers, those powers allow the DDA to collect and capture tax increment and use it for the purposes under the statute, as well as your plan of development. Your plan of development is going to be kind of the Bible document for your DDA. It's the document that the town's going to prepare in anticipation of the DDA formation. And that document basically says, this is what Town of Fraser would like to see the DDA do in its community vision. Okay, so to me, the DDA is a separate governmental entity, but you have oversight over that entity with their budget and bond issuance, if there is any. And so really the towns and the way they work together is numerous. So my two DDAs work closely with their public works department to understand what the infrastructure needs would be on a certain development site. Working with the economic and planning department to make sure that you are aligned in visioning, to make sure that the planning and zoning and entitlement process is going to be functioning well and efficiently for your developers coming in. And then you'll also be working, the town finance department and the DDA will also work closely together. The statute and the formation ballot measure will allow the town to collect the revenues on behalf of the DDA, or the DDA may collect those directly by itself. So there's really, to me, they are a separate governmental entity, but they're really kind of you're on your team. So you should really be working in conjunction, the two entities, the two governmental entities.
So you say it's a governmental entity. Is it underneath the town government, or is it the county, or is it the state, or what? Where does it live? I guess I'm struggling to understand how that works, and who pays the bills? I mean, who pays the operating costs? Who pays for the staff and all that?
So
Sure.
the DDA reports to the Department of Local Affairs, and it's Title 31. So there's all these Title 32 districts that are much more common, but Title 31 is the statute under which these are created. And so they're kind of in a small pool, but it's similar to where you might find things like metro districts or mosquito districts. Those are all Title 32. This is similar to that, but Title 31. So it's kind of in the small category. And I'll hand it back to you, Troy.
Yeah, it's its own governmental entity, permitted with powers and a board under Colorado statute.
So it's under the state. Under the
Correct.
government. Okay.
But like, for example, for accounting, sometimes it's a component unit of the town's audit, for example. So DDAs are unique in that way to Title 32 districts or URAs, in that they do have a more symbiotic relationship with their forming municipality than these others, but it is its own separate governmental entity.
And who pays for the operations and the
Yes.
staff? Where does that come from? Where does that funding come from?
Money.
Sure, that's an excellent question. So to me, there's three sources. The first source taken off the table, that's your up to $5 million levy. That is what a lot of the 17 other DDAs do. I don't know if they all have it, but a lot of them do. And they'll use that $5 million levy for operations, and then kind of allocate the tax increment strictly to projects. My two clients, as I said, do not have that $5 million levy. And so they are left with two funding sources. One, the tax increment, and then two, in both instances, the municipality provided small startup funding to the DDA to get rolling with rules, procedures, board policies, and implementation of programming. And because I think it's important to be patient with tax increment, you have to understand that tax increment won't be generated unless you have a development. And so that's why tax increment is a funding mechanism, but it's also that incentive tool to bring those developers in.
And does that mill levy, does that have to go before the citizens for a vote?
Only within the boundaries of the DDA. Yes.
Okay.
And so would a debt authorization election. So both of my DDA clients had a formation election, and then they subsequently had a bond election. I want to be clear, you don't need a bond election. You are able to expend your tax increment via what is called development and reimbursement agreements.
Okay, all right, thank you.
You're welcome.
So if I understand correctly, the developments can have an impact on the fire protection district and the schools, but they receive no financing for that impact for 30 years.
Well, it really depends on your boundaries, number one, and what infrastructure is already there. Okay. So for example, if I heard, you know, in the opening comments from the conversation that Catherine started, you know, I heard more business and commercial development, for example. Okay. So I'll use that. And so you have to look at what infrastructure is already there, what's required for that particular project. And so I think that it's not necessarily a foregone conclusion that the fire district or the school district would be impacted. You know, unless it's a large residential development that you want to create in this downtown development authority, you know, then that could have an impact of bringing more families and more students. More students equals more funding at the school district level. At the fire district, you know, if there is some burdensome, you know, capital improvement infrastructure need, that's where the DDA can help fund those things. So, you know, the DDA is really trying to be a partner with all of the taxing jurisdictions. It's not necessarily one that's trying to basically unload burdensome infrastructure costs to the other jurisdictions. I think part of what the DDA does is help fill some of those gaps.
Okay. So an allowed use of those increment funds would be if the DDA board chose to do some additional funding to those special districts?
Well, if it's related to a development. So
Okay.
if it's related to a development that you're attracting, and let's say, you
But not for
know,
just general operations, dollars for
correct.
just general operations. Okay.
Yeah. So if there is, like, you know, let's say, you know, the fire department needs, you know, there needs to be more, you know, fire hydrants. That's an infrastructure cost of public benefit and very much an eligible cost that the DDA may expend its tax increment on, for example.
Gotcha. Okay.
All right, we can keep moving and we can jump in with any additional questions as you have them. We wanted to do a case study.
We have one more. We have a question from the audience.
Oh,
Okay.
Hi, how are you guys? Thanks for the presentation. It's Clark Lipscomb at Grand Park. I just listening to this, what is the benefit of doing a DDA over a metropolitan district? They sound very similar. If you use developer advance notes, or I think you called them development and reimbursement notes or agreement, presumably that would be funded by the town. And if the revenues aren't there to repay that, what are the implications to the DDA or the district, whatever the case may be? Or if debt is issued, Troy, and the tax increment increase necessary to service that debt is not there, what are the implications to the town?
Sure. Excellent informed questions. So and if I forget any, I'll ask my colleagues to nudge me, or I'll ask you to remind me, but I think I got all of them. To start, metropolitan districts can be used for similar purposes. They're typically used on a blank piece of dirt, okay? where there is no infrastructure, there's no sidewalks, there's no streets. And a metro district will always have a bond issue involved because you are bonding initially in the early years of a metro district without your development yet developed. Okay. And so you will have an extra mill levy on day one. As soon as those metro district bonds are issued, there will be a mill levy on those future properties built on that piece of dirt. And what the metro district bonds do is they fund specifically all that infrastructure, streets, curb, gutter, stormwater, sewer, etc. Then the developer comes in, builds homes or commercial businesses on top of that infrastructure. And so then you'll have a mill levy of upwards to 55 mills for a period of 25, 30 years. Okay. And whereas a DDA, you're right, can be used to make similar improvements, but typically there's already a downtown corridor there, right? And there isn't a piece of dirt there that needs completely new infrastructure. And principally, the biggest difference in my mind is the tax mill levy. You don't have that. That's not a given on day one with a DDA. As I said, I'm personally navigating my clients through policy, practice, and procedure to be sustainably operating entities. And so they don't have that 5 mil levy and they don't plan to ask voters for it. So there is no tax impact from that perspective. Your second line of questioning, we're also informed because to me, DDAs really help the risk management of development projects for municipalities. My metro area DDA, I help them draft a pretty comprehensive board policy that specifically put in risk management measures to avoid the scenario that you just outlined. Certainly I've never let a client enter into a reimbursement agreement or a bond issuance agreement without thorough due diligence. And what I mean by that is, one, DDAs typically provide funding in the form of a reimbursement. We are not writing blank checks to developers. So we are actually asking developers to put in their money first, okay? And then for the part that they need some help on, they'll get reimbursed those funds upon completion or certain performance milestones, typically like a certificate of occupancy. And while, that may not be amenable to all developers, I think it's prudent fiscal and financially prudent policy to provide this funding on a reimbursement basis so that you avoid that situation where there's a development that's halfway built, which is basically the worst case scenario, and you don't have a developer anymore. What that reimbursement agreement really allows you to do is protect you, the town, and your community from ending up holding the bag when a developer doesn't perform under the development agreement. Did I answer all of your questions, sir?
Yeah, I think so. I think one question for the board and perhaps the town managers is do y'all know an area that you're thinking about for this DDA? And because what he just described is I think that's a pretty good explanation of the differences. And I'm trying to figure out, is this Victoria Village related or is it all of that? Or what is the
We
area?
haven't
Because
decided
it's
yet.
relevant.
So this is just, we're just exploring. First stages of.
To learn
so,
about.
yeah.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Well,
a
I think
lot
the
of
point is it's relevant to what you're trying to
20
accomplish
minutes
and
left in
where.
this now, so and we have a
Yeah.
lot of presentation. So
Thank you.
if we could-
Thanks, Troy.
And I just
You're
want
welcome.
to
We
add
have 15
a
minutes.
couple, just a
15
couple
minutes.
thoughts to Troy's response for that before I pass it over to Andy. And we will be cognizant of the time. So the DDA by statute has to be in a traditional central business district. So as Troy alluded, it's not like a metro district in that you can just be kind of out in a field. It does have to be in a traditional commercial core. The other thing is that DDAs are often used in instances where you want to give representation to your business community. And metro districts have not really ever been accused of that. So the DDA can be set up so that people who may not be able to live in town, but they own a business in town, have a body that is representing them. And that's all kind of decisions that you make in terms of how your board is set up, how the members are elected or appointed. But you can set those things up so that your businesses do have a place and an advocate in the town. So just a couple additional thoughts to what Troy's response was, and we'll move on to Andy. And thank you.
All right. Well, these are great questions, Troy. Thank you for the presentation. Kat, thank you for the introduction. And hello, Town of Fraser. It's good to be here with you. My name is Andy Arnold. I am the founder of Pioneer Development Company. If you haven't heard of us, it's because this is a very new company that we actually started at the new year. Prior to this, I worked for a company called Short Elliott Hendrickson, doing public-private partnerships across the state of Colorado and also all over the nation. So I have a lot of experience with tax increment financing. I think it's a great tool when it's used properly. And what I want to talk about with you right now is a case study of how tax increment financing was leveraged to create a development that the community wanted, right? Not just a development that made money for the private sector, but using your incentive structure to not just regulate a development, but steer it towards what the town of Fraser would need. In this particular example, I was working with the city of Durango, and this is an area, this is actually done under an urban renewal authority, not a downtown development authority. But the process is similar. This is very close to our central business district. It's in North Maine. They allocated a boundary, which you can see with that dotted blue line, where they wanted this to be a gateway area. This is on the north side of town, US 550 on the way the Purgatory is going up that way. You're coming into Main Ave, and East 32nd Street is also one of the main corridors to a lot of the neighborhoods. So that intersection and that whole area was something that was highly trafficked, and it just wasn't really generating the investment that the community wanted to see. And what ended up happening, and as I'm going through this, I want you to imagine parts of your own central business core or properties that, you think, I wonder if there would be a way to get a higher and better use, right, on that particular property. What happened in this instance, and you can see it with the white arrow on those two green areas, was there was these two dilapidated single family homes that were actually zoned for higher density. And those two dilapidated single family homes were on sale. A developer ended up buying that parcel. You could see it's close to a park, very close to the Animas River. It was a highly desirable real estate. And this developer was going to just subdivide this up into 5 small, narrow single family home lots and sell single family homes on that parcel. Those single family homes would have been well into the millions of dollars. We all know how our housing crisis is occurring all throughout Colorado. This would not be local workforce housing, right? And yet it had a zoning that would allow it to be higher density. So what we did is we approached the developer and we said, what if we created an incentive package to get you to consider something different? He was legally allowed to create these single family homes. It wasn't going against the zoning, but he could do something different. And so the developer, of course, was a little skeptical. They're like, what are you talking about? And so we started working with them. We opened up the books. We looked at their pro forma. We looked at tax increment financing. And we found that this particular development, if you were to go to a model that was townhomes, and in this case, it was 22 townhomes, that would have generated about $600,000 in tax increment financing over a 25-year period. If it was a DDA, it would actually have been able to go out to 30 years, so it would have been a little bit higher. Now, the developer, we asked, would that $600,000 encourage you to go to a higher density? And developers like, absolutely, that could pay for some stormwater improvements, which was a major issue right on that property. And then we went a bit of a step further. We said, well, great. If you're interested in partnering with our organization, let's say this was in Fraser, if you're interested in partnering with the DDA, we'd like to not only get higher density here, but we'd like to try to make this more affordable for the community. And so we ended up, the DDA, or in this case, it was the URA, but let's just say it was the DDA, partnered with a local nonprofit housing. It was called Homes Fund. It was a nonprofit housing provider, second mortgage provider, and ended up creating a deed restriction for 10 of these 22 units. So 12 of them were market rate, 10 of them became deed restricted, and 4 of those 10 were income qualified units that are being directed to our police officers or firefighters, our teachers. Those income qualified units are being sold for around, it's still a big number. It's like $390,000 for these townhomes, but that's $100,000 less than any other townhome on the market currently in Durango. And the developer was willing to do this, not only because they got encouraged by having a partnership with the community, but also because of that tax increment financing, which we were able to reallocate. Now, I know there was a question, well, what happens, and Troy alluded to this as well, well, you have to be patient for tax increment financing. What if you don't have it right on hand? In this particular case, because it was an affordable housing development, the city actually funded, using ARPA money, the $600,000 directly to the organization, in this case, the Urban Renewal Authority. In your case, it would be a Downtown Development Authority. And then the city, the Downtown Development Authority, signed an agreement with the city where all of those property taxes would go back to pay off that loan over 25 years. That's how they got the upfront capital to make it work. It's a catalyst project for this area, for this gateway area, and actually just was featured in Urban Land Institute's magazine of an example of a public-private partnership that can yield some workforce housing. That's a rendering of the block. Instead of single-family homes right there, you see it's infill development very close to US 550, and it's been a success. We're actually under construction right now. The whole process between negotiation, setting up the area, setting up the tax increment financing, and doing all the plans of development only took about 6 months. And so this was, I think, hopefully this can, I know we're talking about numbers and financing and how this all plays out. This is a real world example of how you can leverage your DDA to incentivize development. And you said you're a growing downtown. That's great. You have development pressures, you have demand, you have some investment interest. I say the reason why DDAs and URAs are so powerful as tools in Colorado is because it's a public-private partnership controlled locally, where you're not just regulating development, you're steering that investment, you're steering that demand towards the things that you locally need and want. So I'll stop right there. Happy to answer any questions about this particular project or other projects in general.
That one will definitely have an impact on the school districts. I guess that's the special district component and their impacts over time, and not getting additional funding is about the only thing that I see that's could be a downfall.
Well, it's a great point. Believe it or not, the school district was very supportive of this project. They actually pledged the entirety of their general fund mill levy to support the tax increment financing on it. That didn't include any bond levies or things like that you really can't pledge as a school district to tax increment financing. But the reason they wanted this is because some of these units are going to be purchased by their teachers. And so it was like they thought that was a worthwhile investment. And then on the other side of that, the school district also recognized something that Troy alluded to, which is this could create more students. And because of Colorado's total funding formula, total program funding formula, new students is actually going to exceed the property tax revenue that would have been generated by the development, even if the mill levy wasn't applied. One of the things I work on are impact reports with these. And it's something I would recommend the DDA consider anytime they undergo a development project. It's not required by statute the same way that URAs require it. But what you do is you can forecast TIF. You can see how much it's going to accumulate over 30 years for each taxing entity at their mill levy. And you can talk to that taxing entity and say, look, are there any issues that you see arising from this revenue stream being allocated to this development? And in some cases, like in this one, the school district was like, no, we're willing to support it as long as we can get to a certain price point, and open it up to our teachers via a lottery. And that's why they got on board with it.
Okay, we have about 4 minutes left as I'll just first.
I'm going to skip ahead just to some of the kind of hurdles that you have to overcome for formation, Andy, to save some time.
I'm sorry, could you, back to slide 13 and 14, your toolbox, you have acronyms there that I'm not real familiar with. I think you just defined URA. What is BID, and can you tell me why you guys are recommending a DDA versus the other two?
Just to be fair, we're not recommending it, but we were told that that was what you wanted information on. So we work with all. BID is Business Improvement District. Business Improvement District is funded primarily on a mill levy or a property assessment. And so that one is less likely for communities where people are not going to vote to tax themselves. And so they are more common in larger metro areas and less common in smaller communities. A BID runs downtown Denver, downtown Colorado Springs, downtown Boulder, and downtown Grand Junction and downtown Durango, but they are larger areas. Urban renewal authorities are a great tool. They have access to tax increment finance, not the mill levy, and they're really good in communities where you might be looking to redevelop multiple areas. So it seems like a downtown development authority could be a good tool for you, but we haven't done any of the background work. We were just, contacted and asked to present on downtown development authorities.
Okay, and those are all under Title 31?
Oh, yes, except not the URA.
Correct.
The BID and the DDA are.
I don't think we have enough time to go in more depth, but
Right. We got about a minute left is all. So if we can wrap it up, be great.
Yeah, so we just had, these are kind of the things that happen. So really thinking about the boundaries and using that as a time to connect with those different taxing entities, to connect with your community, really understanding what people want, so that you can be thoughtful about the boundaries. And actually, this is your slide, Andy. If you want to take it, you can, or I can keep going.
No, it's fine, Kat. And I know I want to be conscious of everyone's time. Just when you're thinking about these tools, and again, I'm going to keep speaking from the perspective of DDA because that was what we wanted to present on tonight. Although all three of those tools are great ones. Really be strategic. I think that's like the key takeaway with this. A downtown development authority, for all of the acronyms, for all of the statute, really all it is a local municipality's ability to create an economic development vehicle that has some creative financing tools available to the municipality to run in parallel with your community development department, with your planning, with your zoning, with your comp plan, all of that. That's all how you're going to regulate a development. This is a tool to help incentivize that development, get that developer to be thinking for a higher and better use is what I say when it's used properly.
And we do have additional resources in beyond the ones that we sent. If you go to our website, downtowncoloradoinc.org, we've got a ton of different things out there. And if you have additional questions, we are always here to help you. We're a membership organization and we work with communities like yours across the state every day. So just give us a call and we're happy to field your questions.
Great. Thank you very much for to all of our presenters.
Yeah.
We really appreciate it.
Very informative. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
And thank you, Troy and Andy.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, let's take a 3-minute break.
Sounds good. You got it. Huh. Ironic, huh? On the one hand,
It was actually quite hilarious that she didn't know that. I actually got the giggles from it. So.
So I'm here.
We're doing open.
If it's on the agenda, I guess is my point. I'd rather do his presentation and be able to address it.
Which one?
They sign it.
I'll ask for public comments
Okay, that's what I.
because we don't, the open forms for business not on the agenda.
Yeah, I just want to make sure.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some open.
Yeah.
Some public comment. That's all.
But I'm going to limit it to the standard 3 minutes. So keep it 3 minutes. Remember. You can do what you want. It's a we live in the greatest country in the world.
They shouldn't be. That's right. They shouldn't be. That's why.
He's back. He's back. Okay, you ready, Michael?
Yeah, we're also.
I'd like to call to order the Town of Fraser's regular board meeting on January 18th, 2023 at 7:05. Can I please have a roll call?
Louis Gregory.
Eileen Waldo.
Oh, Quinn.
Katie Souls.
And Philip Vanderneel. So we did have a change to the agenda. The Victoria Village contract award needs to be removed. We're just not quite ready for that. And then there was a correction to the minutes on the consent agenda. So I just want to make sure that the trustees were aware of that before we vote on it. So if I can have a motion to approve the agenda with removing Victoria Village contract board, I would appreciate it.
So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? And then the consent agenda, which includes the minutes from November 30th, 2022 and January 4th, 2023. We get a motion to approve those. So moved.
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, now we're at open forum. This is where the public can address the board on items that are not on the agenda. You'll have 3 minutes. And then if you're online, you would digitally raise your hand. If you're here in the audience, you can physically raise your hand here in the audience. So if anybody would like to address the board, now's your chance. Anybody here in the audience? No hands are going up. Anybody online? We have Mike, sorry, I'm gonna, Zeiler?
Mike Zeeler, how are you guys?
Excellent.
Thank you for giving me a few minutes to talk here. Just wanted to chat briefly about one of your agenda items, talking about baseline.
So Mike, I'm gonna ask for public comment on that particular topic when it comes to that. So this is for topics that are not on the agenda.
Very good, thank you.
Oh, yeah, I thought I asked that, but apparently not. Okay, is there nobody else? No digital hands going up? Okay, we are now at discussion and possible action, and we have Shanna Gann with the Grand County Historical Association funding request and document and photo preservation here in the building. So welcome.
Hi, Shannon.
Well, this has been put off
Welcome
a
back.
couple times, so we're
It
glad to
has,
have you
but
here.
that's okay. That's okay. Because, well, hello, everyone. I know most of you. I'm Shanna. I'm the executive director of the Grand County Historical Association. And we have Cousins Ranch, which is in Fraser, across the street from the rec center at the entrance to Rendezvous. Can you go to the next slide? Or who's doing the slides? Are you? Thank you. So our organization was founded in 1974 out of the Pioneer Society, which were homesteading families in the area. It brought people that were interested in Grand County history and preservation and preserving these historical buildings together. We have 4 museums in the county, which are Cousins Ranch, Emily Warner Field Aviation Museum, Heritage Park, which is in Kremling, and Pioneer Village, which is in Hot Sulphur. I'll just look at you. That's Cousins Ranch. That was an aerial photo that was taken and used with our grant to the State Historical Fund. And the reason we were applying for the State Historical Fund, you can go. Oh, we're talking about the family first. They came in the 1870s. It was the first homestead in the area. If you've never been there, it is master craftsman. The family also built the Fraser Mercantile, which so they were 2 of the remaining buildings in the area of that age. So once you arrived at Cousins Ranch, you arrived into the Fraser Valley. So the last direct heir of the Cousins family passed away in 1937, and the property was deeded to the Jesuit priest from Regis University. This property was then used as a summer retreat by the Catholic Church until the 1980s. During that time, the church began selling the land that they had from the Cousins family to developers. The remaining house, post office, and stagecoach stop had fallen into disrepair. And a group of volunteers with the support of the town of Fraser rallied to save Cousins. And through these efforts, and what happened is the church donated the property to the town of Fraser, which then deeded it to the Historical Association. And through these efforts, the property was listed on the National Register of Historic Places in 1988. And then restoration was completed and opened as a museum in 1991. And so this picture we have is actually the act of signing the deed for Cousins Ranch to the Historical Association. Cool. It's more than a museum. It's a landmark in the community. Cousins Ranch provides a place to discover the origins of Fraser, play like a pioneer, and showcase art in one of the last few gallery spaces in the county. And I say that last few is a little misleading. We offer gallery space to artists in the community to share and sell their work. It is offered to any artist of all ability, and artists received 60% of the proceeds of their sales, which has been great. We have been full. I think we are in our third year, and we are already full for 2023 and are booking artists for 2024. We provide educational experiences in classes and host community events. This year, so it'd be 2022, we will have welcomed 12 artists. Also had a local Peaks and Pines Quilt Guild show, provided 3 field trips to the elementary school and preschools, which we do for free. Hosted 3 educational talks on water projects, archaeological digs, and the history of ranching, and hosted 77 community events for all ages. And this is coming off of COVID. Usually, historically, we've done more, and we are working to increase our numbers. In addition to operating physical museum, GCHA acts as a resource, housing and preserving the physical items that tell the story of Grand County. These items are from photographs to documents to, we have an electroshock machine in the basement. And they're from all parts of life in Grand County. The archives are located in Pioneer Village Museum and cataloged through a digital system called Past Perfect, housed in the cloud. It is our goal to have this cloud available to the public in the future. The advantage of the system is it allows us to preserve photographs digitally and avoid natural damage that occurs to aging photographs. Our climate-controlled archives provide the best environment for delicate items, and we would like to provide this service to the town of Fraser. I've heard you have a basement full of artifacts and photos. Our preservation costs. So these 4 buildings are old. Cousins Ranch is coming up on its 150th birthday. So keeping the history of Cousins Ranch live and open to the public isn't easy. We're facing a variety of challenges that are impacting our sustainability in the community. Cousins Ranch is in need of a new roof. This roof has had little maintenance since 1991. The years of wear and tear have led to numerous leaks in the post office, putting the many historic photos and artifacts at risk of being damaged or destroyed. A request for funding for this project was submitted to the State Historical Fund in the fall of 2022. It came with, to replace our roof, it's $86,000. We have raised the matching funds of $30,000, and I think when I did this, we hadn't received the funding, but we did receive $67,000, or maybe that's on the next slide. But the high cost of this project comes from the requirements to use cedar shake shingles to preserve the historic integrity. So since this building's on the National Register, we don't get to use, I asked, can we use synthetic cedar shake shingles? They said no. In addition, we did receive a grant from the Grand Foundation to repair it, but the furnace, it began to leak and pour. It was pouring. It was bad through the ceiling in the stagecoach stop. And so we did receive the emergency funds to replace that furnace in the stagecoach stop. So that was good. So the damage to the roof, as you can see, it's missing shingles. The top left is where it has leaked through in the post office. It's been a problem since they started restoring the building. I found that through letters and documents. They've done different things to try and fix it. I'm hoping that the new furnace in the stagecoach stop, because one of the replacement will help, because one of the problems was trapped heat creating the ice dam, which caused the leak, as we all know happens in our various snow issues. But those are some photos that we submitted with the grant. So also one of our problems is general, oh, you know what, this is the old one, I think. I don't know, because I wasn't going to ask you for $20,000 today, because I know you have already done your budget. So what I was going to ask for today is a waiver of the permit fees that would go along with replacing our roof. I feel that that's a simple cost. I believe it would come to, for us, it would be a cost of $2,000. But because because this was I've given you a different one. But as of for 2022, we did end up, I believe, 38,000 in the red. This is due to an increase of 20% in our operating costs. Compared to other nonprofits, I have 4 locations that I pay electricity, security, internet, gas, water and sewer, and it gets expensive, and those costs did increase. And although we have continued to increase the money that we are able to bring in, I operate 4 museums on $220,000. It is, I know, right? We need help. And so as we move forward, and I think this is what in the updated presentation. So for today's ask, I'm just asking for a waiver of those permit fees so we can get the roof replaced and somewhat control our costs. I was asking that as we move forward in the future, that you consider helping to support GCHA and Cousins Ranch as a line item in your budget. To keep the museum open, just pay the utilities. It is just under $16,000. To pay staff to man it, it comes to $24,000, and that is paying the minimal. I think that's considering my hourly wage of what I pay just front office staff, which is $16 an hour. My other staff, we have 3 other staff members that have their masters, and they still make under $50,000. So I am doing the best that I can to keep my expenses low. But if I'm not able to find a way to keep these museums running, I will not be able to do it, is what the bottom line is. Can you move to the next slide? Let's see what that was for questions. So yeah, so my updated presentation was for that ask, if that was possible.
Thank you.
Do you have any questions for me?
Board, any questions?
Do you receive any donations from the public, like Rendezvous or?
Yeah, so Rendezvous hasn't funded us in a while. I keep asking. They, our donations come in, and I don't have the number in my head, and I believe it came in around $60,000, but that was because we also raised $30,000 for the matching funds for the roof. What I have found, a lot of my asks to the Grant Foundation have been for general operating costs, or no, for projects, and I probably need to be asking for more general operating costs. The difference with how the museum and what we've been trying to do is we're really working hard to update our exhibits. We just updated our children's exhibit. It's completely hands-on. Eileen's been there with her kids. The kids can dress up. We are also opening, and I hope you received my invitation to come to the opening of the Doc Susie updated exhibit. 2 years ago, we purchased a collection of her personal effects from Owen Briggs, which include the wedding dress and the letter from the guy who left her at the altar. I know, right? And we are updating that exhibit. We did receiving some funding, but it, again, doesn't always cover staff costs. That Owen Briggs collection, I think it had 500 items in it. So each one of those items has to be photographed and numbered. A lot of them were fabric, so the number has to be sewn in, and so it's a lot of manpower for those efforts. Did I went way over on asking a question? Sorry. Sorry.
Do you charge admission?
We do, and we actually just raised our admission costs. It is $8 for adults, $7 for seniors, $5 for youth. 5 and under is free, but we also offer free admission to Grand County students. And our membership costs, so for a individual membership is $35, and for a family membership it is $50. You can go upwards of $150 if you want to be a larger patron. And then we also offer, we have a few corporate sponsors at $1,000, one being Fraser Valley Ace. And so trying and asking, I asked the Grand Foundation for a lot of money. They seem to give me the same amount every year. So, which doesn't help with the cost of inflation. Yeah. And keeping staff, which is everybody's problem.
Well, I think your ask is pretty easy. So.
Yeah.
Thank you.
That's easy.
Yeah.
And then next year, I think we should build it into our budget.
Do you,
I think we should look into building it into our budget next year.
Right. Yeah, it's a great asset for our community.
That's fabulous.
do you do any fundraising events? or
Yeah.
anything?
So we were able to raise at our last fundraising event this past year, we raised 55,000. The cost of the event was about 20. So we average, last year we did better. We average somewhere between 40 and 60 for our fundraising events. We've done different things like we did Karen Vance gave us a painting to raffle of the trestle on Rollins Pass. We do smaller events. We're looking at trying to do, we have an idea for something that would maybe be cheaper, because when you do these large events, the cost is so great and you're asking people to buy $150 ticket. I personally can't afford a $150 ticket. So trying to do an event that would be more attractive to younger people at a lesser cost.
I mean, maybe that's something you could partner with the town on.
Yeah.
Sarah's on the call, right? But yeah, I mean, we have a way to get out that information and hopefully attract more people.
Yeah. Well, and it's, that's what updating the exhibits and offering these community events. We offer day camps for youth. We tried to do one at Christmas break. It didn't really take off, but we do one at Pioneer Village in the summer that have been popular, where kids get to dress up and they actually go in the schoolhouse in Pioneer Village and do a day of Pioneer Day School and make ice cream. So we are trying to be that community asset and just trying to really find our identity and slip in there.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Do you have a question, Clark?
I did. I was just gonna say, they provide a wonderful service and a great facility. And, Mr. Mayor,
You just declared it on record.
history is very important to me, to my family, grandpa. My mom's a historian. And what I would propose, because we are supporters of the Grand County Historical Association, if the town can find its way to break loose with over the permit fees are easy to waive. I will match with the Grand Park Foundation, whatever funds you guys can decide to give them tonight, if anything. And the Grand Park Foundation will match it. So this is a challenge to you all to support the Grand County Housing Authority. Or sorry, do that too, but the Historical Authority with real dollars, so they can
How about 5,000?
done.
How
So
about 10,000?
that would,
Do I hear a second?
so, and my thought is that we've got some savings that we'll be realizing through some of our budget projections for later for projects.
We just gave out a bunch of money we can afford 10 grand. So
Yeah.
Oh, uh-oh. You okay with that?
Do we have a vote?
Did it match? I would move that, based on Mr. Lipscomb's generous matching proposal for these dollars, that we donate 10,000, well, waive the fees and do 10,000 for the Historical Society. Help them along their way.
all in favor?
Where's the money coming from?
General fund.
Okay.
Rob can find it. We're gonna save that much money this summer on our big projects that we've budgeted for, over budgeted for.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Done.
Well, that was
Rob,
fun.
send me the
Surprise,
check when you
surprise.
send it and I'll send one.
Like, y'all just made my day. Thank you very, very much.
Surprise.
I appreciate
Thank you,
you all.
Shannon.
Thank
I know it's
you.
hard to do it.
Thank you. That means the world to us.
Okay, and on that note,
Could I also add Shanna? So Shanna has offered in the basement, we do have a lot of historical photos. And she has offered to help preserve those photos if the town would like to either donate or have.
So we have options.
Yeah.
So when you have historical items, and this is to all of y'all who have been here for the majority of your lives, because when we're starting to talk about history, we are starting to talk about 1940s, 1950s, 1960s, 1970s even, and even into the 80s, because the 80s are getting to almost be 50 years ago. We can scan the photos and preserve them into our archives. That way the image is preserved and won't be subject to the wear and tear that happens just with photos deteriorating. And you have a choice. You can either donate the photo to the Historical Association, and that would be donating the copyright, the rights to the photo. And that means that we would be able to, oftentimes we will sell digital images to, well, we just did some for Devil's Thumb, or if people are writing books, or if they're just want a copy of a photo, we will sell those. Yeah, it is an income source. Or you can retain the rights to the photo, and that means we won't sell it. So those are the different options when that happens.
I think we need to look at our records because a lot of that historical information stuff was donated by families
Mhm.
to the town. So we would, before we can
So
say
therefore,
anything to right now, we need to look back and see how they were donated. to the town.
and so what the benefit to you would be is you would have your basement back without.
Yeah, but
yeah.
I'm just saying we can't make that decision.
Oh,
tonight
about the
without-
copyright, of
yeah,
course,
so,
and that's
yeah,
fine, and it
we
happens.
need to do a little more research before.
That's something that's very normal and usual, that the town of Fraser would retain the copyright, and that's it. And if someone wanted a photo,
We just need to look if a
Mhm.
family donated it specifically to the town of Fraser, for the town of Fraser to keep forever, then we need to make sure that we're okay.
Right.
So.
Right.
I'm not sure who was gonna do that. but
I'm sure stuff out of the basement's better than in the basement.
I mean, yeah.
Is
I'm
there,
not
can we
opposed
do
to it.
partial, part and partial? Like donate some of them and keep,
sure, you can even let us scan them so they're preserved in the archives, and we'll give you the photo back.
No, we just need to do some research. 'Cause
Yeah.
I'm just, yeah.
Yeah, but we are more than willing. We do have some archival space, not for large objects, but yeah, that we can preserve those for you. Great. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you, Shayla. You're welcome. Thank you, guys. Like, big thanks.
Okay, Rob, you're up.
Okay.
So, treasurer's report to wrap up 2022. Next slide, please. We'll do the statement of funds, the sales tax revenue, and then introduction to 2023. Statement of funds overall for the year grew, mostly in reserves. We were able to control operations. This is generally because collecting sales tax and deferment of projects. That was the real growth in our reserves. Was we weren't able to get a lot of the projects that we were pulling reserves or planning to use reserves on. And so they're going to carry forward to 2023. Sales tax, best year to date for sales tax. The top blue line, we had a little rally in technically November because it posted in December. We will see where the holiday spending ends up. Really, we'll know that in February. Just because it delays the end of the year, people report a little bit lower, slower. So most of the December revenue shows up in the February reports. Any questions?
Probably because of the good start to the ski season, right?
Yeah. Early snow helps a lot. And Joe and I were talking about looking at his snow and weather reports and comparing that to our sales tax data. And it goes pretty well as far as the winter months. We've seen a difference in the summertime based broadly on, I'll say, fall foliage, biking, and events. So, and that's when it seems to be people coming more into town rather than stopping at the resort. Yep. Any other questions? Cool. Now, last bit is looking at 2023. So in the fall, and we'll bring up the ClearGov. So ClearGov, when we started in the fall talking about budget, we started with capital projects, and then we went into personnel, and then we came up with the whole budget. And so kind of taking that same format with ClearGov. Okay. What we've taken, one of the things we did focus on this year was getting 10-year CIPs, water efficiency plans, working with engineers to lay out the groundwork for the next 10 years. These numbers reflect the projects for 2023. We had budgeted 4.5 million. We've updated some of the costs. We're at 5. There's a little bit of overlap, so we're going to keep refining that. But now we know where some of the projects can, if we have savings in one, where we can move it around. But over the next 10 years, we're looking at $64,652,000. That does not include JFF, which budget rolls into this one right now. And it does not include some of our streets because we haven't gotten a full inventory. We're going to wait till the spring. So all of this will get added in. It's a big number.
So we need more development, some more commercial spaces. Probably help that out.
That could help it out. But a lot of this is building out elements that are starting to wear out. So increasing development might be, it's a balancing act like everything else. What's going to happen here is these, as you see, they're not submitted right now because they roll into the budget and they'll double count right now. But they're going to get refinement on each of these projects. It lays it out. We'll be able to look at a 10-year plan and score projects in order to rank them, kind of like that same exercise we did in the fall. And saying these are the high priority projects, or this failed, we need to move this from year 8 to year 3, and be able to maneuver where this money is. But if year 7 everything hits and we're not prepared for it, that's kind of on us to figure that out along the way. This will be something that the department heads and leads will evaluate, rank. You as board members will be invited to be able to make comments and review as we go through this. And then this can also be shared with the public. And if someone drills into a project, they can see where the funding sources are coming from, which pieces of machinery are really at the high priority, on a map where these things happen. And so this takes our capital from being a, hey, this is what we think we need and Band-Aid version to much more long-term strategic. So, any questions? This is where we'll be doing our future reports.
Yeah, so you sent us an invite to, I've gotten on the site, but are we going to get any sort of training on how to use it at some point?
Yes.
Okay.
The biggest training is when you see the surplus in red, it's not actually a negative. They just have a bad color coding. It makes me flinch every time I see it.
I worry when I see red.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay.
So yeah, we will go through more extensive training on it. And that's some of it, they're good tutorials in this program, but this is going to change a lot of how we approach budgeting and the transparency of it to be able to do the updates and know where we are throughout the year.
Sure.
Great, thanks. Okay. Baseline planning services cost analysis, Rob.
Mr. Mayor, before we get going on that,
we will be taking public comment on this.
pardon me?
We will be taking public comment on the baseline planning services cost analysis.
Okay, but Mayor, I was wanting to talk a little bit about the treasurer's report just briefly, if that's all right.
Yeah.
Again, this is an important tool, the ClearGov. This is something that we've been working for over a year. With the transition between Beth and to Rob, it's good to see Rob bringing this online. This is a good management tool, not only for myself and the board of trustees, but for department heads, for keeping track of how our resources are being allocated. What is our what they call budget to actual cost. It can help us monitor spending and expenditures so much better than anything we've had in the past. So I'm really encouraged by Rob, and thank Robbie for getting this online, and we'll continue to perfect this. That $64 million is a need. It's not a wish list. It's not a want. Would be nice to have kind of thing. These are identified needs. It doesn't necessarily mean that we're going to spend $64 million over the next 10 years, But it does allow us, as Rob explained, it does allow us to do a little bit of management, do a little bit more planning, prioritize, take it and leverage opportunities and so forth. And we can move things around within those budgets as well. So anyway, thanks for that presentation, Rob.
Thanks, Ed. Okay, baseline.
In the packet. Yeah, after this one. So this is basically going through comparisons with baseline from June to November using 6 months of data. So we at least got a good sample of a half a year during the building season. Basically breaking out, basically looking at baseline actual cost and where they're allocated from June to November, cost versus the fees, internal versus external, because that's the big question, and cost management options going forward. So this is where baseline, all the charges from June to November have broken out. The big orange is basically town administrative charges. This is people calling, planning, and any kind of projects that we're doing. The blue that's at the top, that was ramp up. That was basically getting all the details and all the stuff for baseline to get started and ramp up over 3 months. And then everything else is tied to a specific development project going forward. And they are, Victoria Village, the major site plan from 461 Muse, major site plan for Coasling on Main, major site plan for Middle Park Health, major site plan for Doc Suzie, Grand Park, Rendezvous, those were plans within those, and major site plans for 510 North Xerox and the minor site plan and a minor site plan for Rocky Mountain Chalet.
Yeah, that's 67,000, Rob.
Mhm.
It doesn't include when I call the town to ask a question.
Yep.
They bill that to the client. They also build them for a citizen calling and asking about their project.
If it's tied to a project, because a lot of projects go,
That's not how that should be. They shouldn't be, if I have a question about a project, it shouldn't be attached to the project. That should be attached to the town's bill.
okay. That's not what it is in the contract, because a lot of the projects also have neighbors calling in.
We were told that this wouldn't cost the developers or the town more money for the baseline. And this figure does not show that to be true.
I think that is one assessment. Going to the next slide. We look at cost versus fees. Over the last 4 years, these are the developer fees that have been collected versus what it would cost for an internal planner for total compensation and the percentage of that time. So if we have an internal planner, they should only be spending at the most 30%, 36% of their time on development projects. And that is not the case.
What's the planner for if it's not to go over the project?
Well, I mean, but based on the fees that we collect, so either the town is subsidizing development
Well, so the
by
town needs to-
through a
so the town needs to
FTE.
increase its fees, but these numbers are outrageous. I mean, I don't know if you know, but for every $1,000, you add $70 in rent
Mhm.
per month. For every $100,000 on the development, you add 30%, so another 30,000 on top of that for the sale price. So if we're having this high of bills, you're just making everything more expensive in town. And we're subsidizing a company that's not even local.
So, but these fees,
Mhm.
whether we worked with this company or we had our own planner, those fees would still be in place. Is that correct?
We collect these fees as part of the development process.
Okay.
And when we pay for a planner, those are the fees in the middle column. That's the actual town cost. So in order to cover a internal planner, one option would be make sure the fees are matching that, which is raising all the development fees regardless.
So,
An internal planner on average is about $60 an hour. Baseline on average, I'll call it 120. It's about 116. And go to the next slide.
So if they're 116 an hour, let's just take that 46 Muse Drive.
Mhm.
That's a $7,000 bill for 6 units. That's like 60 hours
Mhm.
to review a plan. And all they're doing is reviewing the site. They're not doing the buildings, they're not doing elevation. It's just the site.
They're also prepping it for going to the planning commission and negotiating with the neighbors who were speaking out against it.
There's no negotiate but that should be a town charge. That shouldn't be the developer charge.
I mean, it's the cost of the development in the town.
That's why we have an in-house town planner. That's the better reason to have an in-house town planner or work out a deal with Winter Park.
Their planners don't have extra capacity right now.
My understanding is they're willing to talk to us about it.
At last check, no. But what we
last check.
have,
Monday.
when I looked at this, we have, basically, we're passing through $45,000 to developers. The town absorbed $80,000 or $88,000. And if we had an internal planner, it would have been 62. Now the 88,000 includes the 12,000 ramp up. And baseline is on track to be ahead in terms of number of hours, where my planner is capped at 2080 for a year. And so if we look at that and say we take out the ramp up, we're looking at about $67,000 over a 6-month period, which is more in line with a internal planner from a town cost standpoint. The rest are pass-throughs. And we pass through engineering, pass through legal, we pass through consulting fees for the town code. Right now, there are 35 in the state of Colorado, the 35 town or planner positions posted. 12 are for counties or municipalities. The rest are for private planning companies, which ties to the current McKinsey study from 2020 to 2022 that shows that 72% of people have left the public sector or nonprofit sector for other industries. So the idea of bringing an internal planner on, I think, will be an extra challenge, finding somebody, training them up. And during that time period, if it took baseline, basically 123 hours of ramp up time for an internal person, that's dedicating a whole month of their time just to catch up on code stuff and then hope that they've got it. So the last one, in working with Baseline, Ed worked with them to come up with some ideas for cost management. We definitely had too many consultants on the same meetings, and then we want to trim that down. The town has an internal rate, so Victoria Village is part of that, getting a lower rate. But also, once we get through master planning and such, then we are going to make sure some of the planning can be passed off. And then ramp up costs are not going to be there. It's a sunk cost right now. And
So-
Baseline has provided a pre-application option, which would then make early charges to the developer to say, this is going to be a development. This is how much it was going to anticipate costing. And then they can decide if they're going to proceed with that, or if they want to review the code themselves and try to work out what options might be best for them.
I think it's a bad optic that we would discount the fees for the project the town owns and keep the fees high for the private investors that come in and build and develop, because they're the ones that are actually coming in and building development. If we want to chase development out of town, let's just put a moratorium and not have development. We don't have to slowly bleed the developers to death.
But a moratorium would go counter to what you said about more development.
So I'm all for development. I think the town needs it. I think these current costs, I know designers that design the whole project that charge less than this.
Where are they?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I have a question, not necessarily regarding developers, but let's say someone in the community wants to do an addition on their home or something like that.
But hope the
Uh,
neighbors
what's-
don't fall.
What's the procedure on that? I mean, can they call Baseline for general guidance?
Mhm.
And are they charged as individuals for that call?
No.
And that's something that the town absorbs in like this 88,000 you have under town expenses.
Yes. Once it becomes a minor or major subdivision or development project, then it rolls into its own project with Baseline.
Okay, any other questions from the board? Okay, anybody in the audience wanna? Okay, I'm gonna make this very clear. It's 3 minutes, you're gonna have 3 minutes and you're gonna get one shot at it. So you're not gonna sit back down and come back up. You're gonna get your 3 minutes, ask the question, and we'll do our best to answer the question.
Hi, Clark Lipscomb for the record with Grand Park. Left from Rob's report here are the use tax generated by the building permits that come from the developments we create. I'd like to know what the use tax looks like with development and without development. I know use tax goes in the general fund. It's a pretty big number, particularly when we're building a lot of stuff. I think the information and what he just presented is very misguided and misinformed and presents not a good picture, or maybe presents the picture that he and Ed wanted. Our experience has been different. A lot of redundancy, very poor results, very high costs, no organization, no bringing up to speed. My staff and I end up bringing them up to speed. We've got bills from the town that we've objected to. We were told very specifically we would not be charged for these people getting up to speed and for changing and eliminating this planner. It's unfathomable that the town manager would negotiate a rate that applies to town projects and doesn't apply to every development. Every development in the town is a town project. You guys just talked about having a development authority to entice developers to come here. So this is not working well. And I think we could hire an internal town planner. They could address the neighbors. They can process building permits. Because Rob, if what I understand is when we put in a building permit, we're not going to get any cost whatsoever from baseline. Is that my understanding? Because you guys get building permit fees as well that come to the town. Those are not reflected in what he just showed you. Okay. If he showed those in there, the numbers are far better doing it with the staff planner. The results are better. We have people living in our town that understand what we're dealing with, what we want to accomplish, what we need as a community. And that's the right way to do this stuff. And if you guys have special projects that you want to accomplish or the town wants to accomplish, you got a staff person to do it for you. This is not working well. And this is an open checkbook. And in my opinion, a consultant that bills by the comment and completely unmanaged.
Thanks, Mark.
I'm Greg Beckler with 406 Xerox LLC. We're doing the Coast on Main project. And I just kind of want to give my perspective on the last 6 months. So in April 2022, we were introduced to Baseline at our as the replacement planner during our preliminary plat hearing. We proceeded to work in good faith towards our final plat approval. There were many hiccups along the way, but we worked with Baseline, sharing our experiences prior to working with them and getting them up to speed on our project and to get it fully approved by the Planning Commission and ultimately the town board. We proceeded to communicate back and forth with Baseline following our final plat approval on July 20th, 2022 regarding the project. More hurdles arose and we worked to create a timeline of events together that we presented to the town board to ensure all parties were on the same page after these hurdles arose. Everyone was in agreement and our development proceeded. On November 20th, 2022, we received an invoice from the town's finance department identifying that there were several legal, engineering, and planning review fees we were responsible for relating to our project. We replied asking if this invoice was sent in error, as we had never agreed to pay any fees other than the development fees we already paid for the sketch plan, preliminary application, and final plat fees. We received no response to that email. And most recently, on January 17th, yesterday, we were sent an invoice from the finance department for fees from Baseline regarding a proposed development that has no active application, sketch plan, preliminary plat, final plat otherwise. I say all of this to provide the board with my perspective. We collaborated, recommended, or redocumented past events, and did everything in our power to ensure Baseline was up to speed on our project. Should the town decide that this is a structure they want to proceed with, I would caution that such a structure creates an incentive structure that makes developers or potential developers want to avoid any interaction with the town out of fear they may be billed and it creates an incentive for an outside planning consultant to pursue actions that increase development review timelines, increase red tape, and make development overall more complicated for people trying to develop within the town of Fraser. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else? There's no other public here in the, okay, we've got, yeah, that's where I'm going to. God, you guys want to be the mayor? No, jump on over here.
I could just see the hands.
Okay, so we've got 2 hands up, digital hands up right now. Let's go with Mike.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah, we can.
Yeah. I'm like,
Okay, great. Thanks for your time. Sorry I couldn't make it up there. The roads are pretty messy. I would have loved to have been there in person. As most of you know, I'm really passionate about workforce housing and just in general affordable housing. So that's why I really wanted to talk about baseline for a couple of minutes. A couple of things that I noticed from Rob's presentation is that in 2022, development fees and interior, an interior planner would have totaled about $149,000. But obviously or $124,000 for the planner and then $25,000 in the fees. So if I'm reading that correctly, the actual cost of the town is like $98,880 or something like that. So for the total cost of the developer cost and the planners is $149,000. So obviously just simplifying it, $62,000 for 6 months is obviously less than, even if you take out Victoria Village, and if you take out the ramp up fees, that ends up being about $67,000. So in 6 months, it's not a lot of money, but it's $5,000 more or $10,000 for a year going with an outside organization such as Baseline. So the development fees for thus far, just June through November was $45,000. So that's $90,000 for the developers. And if you look back at that other chart, the highest that they've ever had for a year is in 2001, it's $43,000. So basically is really socking it to the developers, which then translates to a guy like me who's trying to do something more affordable and workforce housing in the town of Fraser. That ends up being about $5,000 per unit, specifically with our project. When I figure in the delays that we've incurred due to going into a preliminary plat, as opposed to just being able to go to a final plat on such a simple infill type project like this, we were forced to do a preliminary plat. So that's more interest, holding costs. And then, by the time that we're done with our final plat, it's going to be $10,000 to $15,000. So right there, just those items alone are $5,000 per unit. And we're already having to go back to the people that we have interested in these affordable units and telling them, I'm sorry, but the original price that we were anticipating is now $5,000 more. And that's not taking into consideration the misinterpretation of the code as far as impact fees that are going to hit our project also. That'll increase our project by another $10,000 per unit if that is indeed applied. I also want to say the Baseline has a total conflict of interest. They have and I think that this ties into the preliminary plat rather than going to a final plat right off the bat, which in the code in 19.3.225A1, town staff may waive the requirement to submit a preliminary plat if proposed subdivision is not part of an overall master plan. And there's other criteria also, or other significant levels of engineering analysis are not required. So on our project, it's a very simple infill project. Yeah, there's some drainage things that do require some engineering, but it's not like it's a very complicated project. So all that they've done to our project is basically add about $15,000 per unit by my calculations. So if we're trying to accomplish affordable and workforce housing, this is not the way to go. An internal planner is going to be much more affordable.
Okay, Mike,
as laid out by Rob.
Your 3 minutes is closing in.
Okay, great, thanks.
Okay, Kevin, you're the next one I see with a hand up.
Great. Can you all hear me?
yes.
Awesome. Good evening, members. First, thanks to the board and Clark. That was very cool to see that collaboration.
Kevin, can you just say if you live in the town and who you're with?
Yeah, so I'm with Bison Development. We're doing 406 Xerox. I am splitting time between River Park and Denver, so not a full-time resident. I wanted to quickly speak about the experience with Baseline. I don't want to beat a dead horse on what everyone here said. Really, I want to express my disappointment. We were told Baseline was taking over the planning department, and we were sold on that it would be better and more efficient. I want to caveat that our first experience with Baseline started in the middle of our project, right after preliminary plat approval. We welcome the change, trusting the board, the decision of the town for Baseline to carry the baton from the former town planner to continue the environment of collaboration, innovation, and reaching the town goals. This was not the case. The process to getting approvals became an argument at every stage, riddled with administrative mistakes, red tape, unnecessary steps, countless hours of work on both ends that didn't seem necessary, and erroneous statements and charges. And then to our surprise, we received an invoice from all this 5 months later, which we were never aware of. Let alone we weren't communicated any rates, how the agreement terms, anything along those lines. Looking at this invoice, and I consider myself a fairly friendly person, our pleasantries at the start of phone calls talking about families, dogs, the weather cost us almost $800. A few other charges for a good laugh. 3 members of the Baseline team attended our final plat. 1 member said in total 21 words. We were invoiced $225 from that. That's $11 a word. We've been working with the town on an agreement for deed restricted rentals. Baseline has had little to no involvement on that agreement besides administrative work, which I'm not quite sure what that is. That has been invoiced for $600. That agreement, my guess, is going to be used for Victoria Village and all future deed restricted projects. I could talk about many of these, but we only have 3 minutes. The crux of this is I don't feel Baseline has a vested interest in responsible development, efficiency, or the town's best interest. They have no reason not to spend the developer's time, public time, and most importantly, the town staff time. They're incentivized to do the exact opposite, and that's what we've seen. We want to strive to continue to collaborate and work with the town and do what's best for what the public wants. This collaboration and this goal has become not only impossible, but prohibitively expensive. Thank you.
Thanks, Kevin. Megan is the next hand up.
Hi, thank you. My name is Megan Luther. I am a citizen of Fraser. I live up here full time. I also am in real estate, so I do hear a lot about affordable housing, the struggles people have, and then also people coming in and trying to build. I know you guys as the town and the board have a heavy burden to bear, but hearing what you've heard from these developers, hearing the feedback from the community, knowing that affordable housing is a serious issue. I understand everybody wants to fix that, but when you look at it, would you develop in the town of Fraser? Anybody on the board or anybody in the staff, if you had that option in Grand County overall, would any of you choose to develop and go through, 18 months of your life going through this process and spending all of that money just to provide housing for other people?
Okay, are you done?
Yep.
Thank you. Any other hands up digitally? I can't see. Looks like there's more.
Looks like there's one more. Who was that on the left? I thought there was one more.
Okay, I'm not seeing any more. Board, it sounds like we definitely have something, we need to work through this and figure out what's happening and why, and look at how better the town can assist our developers in keeping housing costs more affordable.
So, and I understand there's the getting up to speed, but I believe one of the developers, and I heard it in passing, had to explain to Baseline about ADA regulations for parking lots. And I think it's when you hit 9.5 or 12 units, 12.5 units, that you have to have ADA parking. If you have 6 units, you don't have to have ADA. I don't know how much that cost them, but I know that was a long discussion they had. That's a federal law, so I would assume that most planners would know that law. Like,
A long-standing federal law.
yeah, long-standing federal law. So that getting up to speed kind of throws me back.
Any other board comments? I mean,
I was just gonna-
we can't just fire our consultants right now.
No, I was just gonna ask.
So this
No,
is
but we
gonna be
need
a
to-
process that we need to look at.
Take a hard look at
Seriously.
it. And if they're, it sounds like they're billing like attorneys.
They're
Nothing
billing
like,
about-
not including you.
What I figured out, the billing around.
The phone
$3
rings,
an hour.
the time starts. Well, and if the time starts initially and traditionally, anyway, looking at how they're,
Have
We
we
got work to
provided
do.
this feedback to Baseline and have we met with them? And, you know, we have 6 months or so experience. It seems like we should have a debrief and figure out,
I don't know, Louis, can we afford to have a conversation with them?
well, I mean, our client, they,
yeah,
they have some responsibility, they have some,
And-
accountability to the town. If they're not performing, we need to give them an opportunity to correct, or, then maybe we talk about changing paths.
Did the town of Fraser put out a job for request for the town planner, or did we advertise for a town plan?
I don't think we did.
No, we did not.
So
Okay.
in the interim, is it possible for us to put together some sort of something that would give us the information from the different developers, the issues that you've had, but make it a little more concise so that we can consolidate it with the help of our incredible Robert, who's good at this stuff, consolidating information and taking it back to baseline and saying, okay, these are our issues, all this. What can you do to help fix it, to make it more workable in the long run for us? Because that's just my thought. We've got the good feedback here from the 4 of them. Maybe there's other folks too that are having challenges or haven't, but like you say, we can't just fire them because we need somebody in that role right now. We can decide at another meeting if we decide we want to just post for it, but it does sound like there's a lot of inefficiencies.
Ed, do you want to explain the conversation you had with Baseline?
Sure. A couple of things. First of all, 6 months ago or 8 months ago when Catherine left, I did explain to the board that, we've got a way to keep going. And that is, we reached out to Baseline, was expecting some services from them. And I told the board at the time, I said, we'll give them through the end of the year, see how things are looking. Well, we got through the end of the year and apparently there's a lot of bugs that still got to be worked out. I would like to take all the comments that were made tonight and have a conversation with Baseline about going forward. I'm not against putting together a job ad, but I will say nationally, it's tough. It's tough to find a planner. And if we are going to do recruitment for a planner, I would recommend that you do recruitment with the new manager in place, not with me, mainly because you don't get a lot of candidates if there's turnover at the manager's position. So we can work out maybe a plan going forward, work with Baseline to address some of these concerns. But I did have a conversation with Baseline. Yes, we had a lot of administrative costs. I think there was some redundancy. One thing I've told Baseline, I've told Barrick this, I've told staff this as well. We're going to follow the code. And that's what we're doing. We are following the code. The code requires, it's unfortunate that, someone like Mike Zeeler, because of our code says that, above so many units, there's got to be a major subdivision. Well, okay, it's above those units. We've got to do the major subdivision. Kozlik on Main, again, we had turnover in the middle of this. I mean, we had Catherine doing some preliminary work, and then we had Baseline trying to get on board. And I, because of those delays, I certainly apologize to Kozlik for that, for those delays that was caused by that. But doing things like reducing our costs. We even talked about, one of the Baseline employees was there to field calls about building permits. And quite frankly, that's a service that the Winter Park Building Department will provide. They will answer questions about building permits. They do plan review for just building permits. But if it has to go through the planning process, we need a planner. We need somebody that knows our code and enforces our code. So, and in this process, it's timelines. And yes, sometimes those timelines are hard about notices and so forth. I do believe that Baseline does a good job of moving projects along. From their opinion, Fraser's process is faster than a lot of front range communities. But that doesn't mean that there's not room for improvement. So I will be talking more about with Baseline about that. I will work with staff and the board. Maybe we'll need to have another discussion about this, maybe a work session about future steps going forward with continuing to outsource planning services, or whether or not we feel it's in our best interest as a town to have that in-house.
Okay, sounds good. It sounds like we have what the staff needs to do moving forward. Look at how this process is working and how we can make things better for everybody. So, is there any other board comments?
Maybe having their, the fees that were unexpected initially, have those publicly posted, clearly posted, so that if anybody that goes through this process knows that what they're looking at. They're looking at a bill by the minute, and you have these conversations. So that kind of thing, just so they know what the fees are. They don't get surprised with.
I think that would certainly help, Katie. I appreciate you bringing that up. One of the things that I wanted to do once we had Baseline on board and experience is to come up with some kind of projected. If it's a major subdivision, you can expect that it's going to take this amount of time. You've got so much notices you've got to do. We've got checklists that's already out there, but what's not in the checklist is some of that information about the cost. For example, or even our SIAs, or construction guarantee agreements, our code all talk about, reimbursable expenses for planning, for engineering, for even for a town attorney. But have some kind of expectation of what those costs should be. Now, that's got to be based on a certain amount of expectation of time, but sometimes that time needs to be extended.
Well, Ed, back in the 80s and 90s, it was 6 months to 9 months to do a major site development in Grand County and Fraser. So I don't know why it's taking 18 to 22 months now to do a major site plan.
Okay, we have a lot of information and our staff has got some work to do. So anything else from? Okay,
Thank you for your feedback.
Next is vacant land service water fees. This is Rob's night at the top podium.
I love this. Attached is a memo that outlines the history, the context, and really the recommendations moving forward under the code. And that is essentially the landowner, which is one of 9 in the town limits that have vacant land with actual taps that are unmetered, and continue paying service fees, develop the land, which would then change the actual cost of those service fees during the development. And then you would then have developed land that you can sell, or sell the land with the taps, because the taps do have value. They do incur a actual cost to the town to maintain service to the taps, because we produce water treatment, everything based on the number of taps that have been sold. Or relinquish the taps to the town and no longer pay service fees.
It's my understanding that the reason people bought taps back in the day when they weren't developing is because they were told we were running out of taps. And I think at the last JFOC meeting, we were told the same thing, we're running out of taps because of the sewage plant's not big enough to take all the taps that we may have already promised. So I think it's hard pressed for us to sit there and say, hey, buy a piece of land in Fraser and maybe you get to build one day and maybe you just end up with raw land because we don't have a tap for it. And then charge them $100 per quarter for the next 20 years while they wait.
Yeah, under the current code, you couldn't buy taps to speculate.
Right.
This was prior, and so this was a land purchase that included taps. So
No, I know,
it
I'm
doesn't
just saying
fit
why they were
currently.
originally bought.
Yep.
So what is option number 3, taps relinquished to the town?
So you can abandon your taps and basically give them back to the town.
What if you're going to develop in the future? Do you need to,
Then you would have to rebuy them.
and how much would that cost?
They would cost $7,000 or $7,500, depending on water or sewer taps.
And back in the 80s, I think when we first, I think it's like $2,400, something like that.
They used to be
Something, so
they
they've
used to
gone
be
up
under
pretty good.
2,200,
Yeah,
but
they've gone
they
up
but this land there was never taps paid. It was purchased with the land. So
Well, unfortunately, back to 7.
Okay, I'm all in favor of, if you don't want to pay the service fees, which you agreed that you can relinquish them and turn them back to the town.
Mhm.
So,
or keep them and keep paying
I mean,
service fees.
the
So-
amount of money the property's appreciated is
astronomical.
compared to the fee is no.
And we're already, both of our water and wastewater funds, we should be looking at rate study, tap studies right now. Because we have $64 million. So, yeah, I couldn't justify voting to not charge for it.
And that's
We're
why we
releasing an
need to sell the
RFP for a
taps
rate
we
study.
have more people using it.
What is
Start
it? What was
development.
We're having an RFP for a
Oh,
rate study, an impact fee study.
Another reason for more development is what I was saying.
Okay, I don't think we need a motion on this. I mean, what, jump up there. Come on, Clark, get up there.
Clark, let's come again.
Start the clock.
So what I don't understand is it appears to me, if somebody's not using water, it's a service fee. It's meant to cover your operational expenses of getting water to their property, into their home and out to the sewer plant. So let's say somebody did buy a fee. Or buy a tap and decided, oh, I'm not building for whatever reason, or I have no water use. Can we sell it back, or can they sell it back to the town? Will the town buy it back from them? If there's no real water flowing through pipes and no water going through a sewer plant, what's the harm to the town? I think the problem is you guys have one of the highest service fees in the state of Colorado, if not the highest. And you did that to try to pad the water fund, to what the mayor is talking about a water fund that's been underfunded, and trying to fix it through charging the residents exorbitant fees to try to rebuild your capital fund is not a great approach. And if you have plenty of taps, like why not? If you have plenty of money, why not buy back the taps from the people? Offer to buy them back at a discount and then take them off the list. It just seems like this has been going on a long time. I've been around here a little while. And it's like, this is a recurring common issue and problem they hear about repeatedly. And the fees are very, very high, particularly for somebody living in a studio, affordable, deed restricted 20% of median income apartment is going to pay the same as a house at the top of Rendezvous. That's ludicrous. You're talking about one bedroom, one bath. So I hope in the rate study, you're analyzing the actual water flowing through units and going to apportion it based on that kind of usage. And then remember, second homes don't use as much water. So be careful about how you do that. I mean, I think we need to figure out a better way to fund the water fund is a key, and charging more for taps may be the best solution. And then likewise, reduce the operational fees or the service fees as they're called, particularly those that aren't using any of the services. Thank you, Mayor.
Thank you. Just wonder how that argument goes when you go on vacation and you don't use your internet service. So, yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry, I'd just like to be clear on what the board's decision is on that, based on the recommendation.
We're not making a
Nothing,
decision.
not, no decision.
So we're not going to vote.
No-
We're
no
probably gonna leave
change.
it
No
as it
change.
is.
Oh, yeah.
So with no change, we're basically not going to entertain a waiver or reduction in fees.
Correct.
Correct.
Thank you.
Okay, ordinance number 490, appointment to the Joint Facilities Oversight Committee.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll take this one, give Rob a break a little bit. This is just an administrative function. It just codifies that when the JFOC members will be appointed. Right now, it's not in our code. We make the appointments, but this kind of codifies it and it becomes a more formal process.
Oh,
If you have any questions.
Is this a resolution we need to vote on? Or ordinance, I mean.
It's an ordinance to codify our code.
Yeah, it would need a motion and a second vote to approve the ordinance.
I make a motion to approve ordinance 490, appointment to the Joint Facilities Oversight Committee.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, we are now at updates. Are there any updates?
I was gonna mention, I went by yesterday, day before the bathroom, this under construction at Lions Pond. They're actually building it.
Yay.
So talked to the guys there. They're running the lines from, looks like towards Safeway instead of across the pond now, but
Cool.
they're building and they said it'd be done by the summer. Which is good to hear.
Yeah, what they're building is they're building the foundation for the bathroom. We have a contract with Conroy. Unfortunately, we have to do it in the middle of winter because they're delivering the bathroom this spring. This project has had several delays, COVID and so forth. We've got 2 extensions on the grant. We've got to finish the project by December of 2024. So the actual infrastructure, the water and sewer lines itself, if it probably won't be this year, it probably next year before they run that water and sewer infrastructure. But they can stub out the foundation. When they deliver the bathroom, it can be put in place, and then we can continue the work. We're still doing some more engineering work on the actual water and sewer lines since we changed the route and not funding that between the 2 ponds anymore.
Great
So-
update. Any other updates?
I attended a webinar on Proposition 122, 123, and 125. And Michael, I'm sure that you've got some of these on your radar for in the future. What's that? Okay, great, perfect. So see what's coming down the pike. There's gonna be money. There's a bunch of money for affordable housing. So great.
About 300 million.
Good, you're on it.
Okay, any other updates?
I was just gonna bring up, Kristen sent an email to everyone around the noise ordinance or noise issue in the town around the trains and stuff. And I thought that was really interesting and I hope everybody had a chance to look at it. And I sent out a link to you guys to take a look at what's available from, a mediation standpoint for particularly train noise, horns.
Have you ever talked to the railroad department about getting rid of their horns?
I have not, but there's a link in here that I'll send out and you can look and see what we could do in terms of remediating and establishing quiet zones. I thought it was a good suggestion.
And you and Andy Miller should have coffee. Okay, any other updates?
I've got one, Mayor. This Friday, I think about noon, CML is hosting a webinar. Anybody can join in. It's about the upcoming legislative session. And it's going to be touching on the legislative agenda and how it might impact municipalities. So if any of the trustees would like to jump on that call, I plan to be on that call if I can with my schedule. But anyway, I just want to give that opportunity. If I believe I forwarded the link to all the trustees, but I can resend that tomorrow morning.
Thank you.
Okay. We are getting ready to go into an executive session. For the people here in the building, we're going to ask you to leave. And then those people online, will be the last item on our agenda other than adjourning. So we will not be coming back from this. And yeah, we have a cheat sheet. You want to do it?
Okay.
I won't even charge you for it.
I move to enter into an executive session for the conference with the town attorney for the purpose of receiving legal advice on specific legal questions under CRS section 24-6-402, 4B, and for the purpose of determining positions relative to matters that may be subject to negotiations, developing strategy for negotiations, and or instructing negotiators under CRS section 24-6-402, 4E, regarding litigation to include town attorney Kenton Whitmore, town manager Ed Cannon, and assistant town manager Michael Brock.
Second.
Is there any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Great, thanks for everybody coming. See you later. Staff that's leaving, have a wonderful night. Declared you're running for mayor. You know you have responsibilities. You have fiduciary responsibilities after you declare them. So, well, I'm just telling you. I did the same thing and I had to do that. So I'll get on. Hey, Michael. Michael.
He's using the bathroom. Okay.
Well, why did we leave the public in our meeting?
Oh, very much.
Yeah.